Welcome to Relevance. The world's greatest podcast. Hosted by author Mike R. Aikins. Where they dare to talk about topics that really matter.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Chapter 3, Faith, Visualizing and Believing in the Attainment of Desire. Faith is the head chemist of the mind. When faith is blended with the vibration of thought, the subconscious mind instantly picks up that vibration, translates it into spiritual equivalent, and transmits it to infinite intelligence, as in the case of prayer. Faith, love, and sex are the most powerful of all major positive emotions. When the three are blended, they have the effect of coloring the vibration of thought in such a way that it instantly reaches the subconscious mind, where it is changed into its spiritual equivalent, the only form that induces a response from infinite intelligence. Love and faith are psychic, related to our spiritual side. Sex is purely biological and related only to the physical. The mixing or blending of these three emotions has the effect of opening a direct line of communication between the finite, thinking mind, and infinite intelligence. How to develop faith. Faith is a state of mind that may be induced or created by affirmation or repeated instructions to the subconscious mind through the principle of autosuggestion. As an illustration, consider the purpose of which you are presumably reading this book. The object is, naturally, to acquire the ability to transmute the intangible thought impulse of desire into its physical counterpart, money. By following the instructions laid down in Chapter 3 on autosuggestion and Chapter 11 on the subconscious mind, you may convince the subconscious mind that you believe you will receive what you ask for. It will act upon that belief, passing back to you in the form of faith, followed by definite plans for procuring your goal. The method by which one develops faith, where it does not already exist, is extremely difficult to describe. Almost as difficult, in fact, as it would be to describe the color of red to a blind man. Faith is a state of mind that you may develop at will after you have mastered the 13 steps to riches in this book. Making repeated affirmations to your subconscious mind is the only known method of developing the emotion of faith voluntarily. Perhaps the meaning may be made clearer through the following explanation as to the way people sometimes become criminals. Stated in the words of a famous criminologist, when people first come into contact with crime, they abhor it. If they remain in contact with crime for a time, they become accustomed to it and endure it. If they remain in contact with it long enough, they finally embrace it and become influenced by it. This is the equivalent of saying that any impulse of thought which is repeatedly passed on to the subconscious mind is finally accepted and acted upon. The subconscious mind proceeds to translate that impulse into its physical equivalent by the most practical procedure available. In connection with this, consider again the statement, all thoughts which have been emotionalized and mixed with faith begin immediately to translate themselves into their physical equivalent or counterpart. The emotions or the feeling portion of thoughts are the factors that give thoughts vitality, life, and action. The emotions of faith, love, and sex, when mixed with any thought impulse, give it greater action than any of these emotions can do singly. Not only thought impulses which have been mixed with faith, but also those that have been mixed with any other positive emotions or any other negative emotions may reach and influence the subconscious mind. From the statement, you will understand that the subconscious mind will translate a thought impulse of a negative or destructive nature into its physical equivalent just as readily as it will act upon thought impulses of a positive or constructive nature. This accounts for a strange phenomenon so millions of people experience, referred to as misfortune or bad luck. Millions of people believe themselves doomed to poverty and failure because of some strange force over which they believe they have no control. They are the creators of their own misfortunes because of this negative belief, which is picked up by the subconscious mind and translated into its physical equivalent. This is an appropriate place at which to suggest again that you may benefit by passing on to your subconscious mind any desire that you wish translated into its physical or monetary equivalent. In a state of expectancy or belief that the transmutation will actually take place, your belief or faith deceiving your subconscious mind when giving it instructions through autosuggestion. As I deceived my son's subconscious, just as you call upon your subconscious mind, is the element that determines the action of your subconscious mind. There is nothing to hinder you from deceiving your subconscious mind when giving it instructions through autosuggestion. As I deceived my son's subconscious mind, to make this deceit more realistic, conduct yourself as if you were already in possession of this material thing which you are demanding. When you call upon your subconscious mind, the subconscious mind will transmute it into its physical equivalent by the most direct and practical media available. Any given order to it in a state of belief or faith that the order will be carried out. Surely enough has been stated to give a starting point from one may, through experiment and practice, acquire the ability to mix faith with any order given to the subconscious mind. Perfection will come through practice. It cannot come by merely reading instructions. It is true that one may become a criminal by association with crime. It is equally true that one may develop faith by voluntarily suggesting to the subconscious mind that one has faith. The mind comes finally to take on the nature of the influences that dominate it. Understand this truth, and you will know why it is essential for you to encourage the positive emotions as dominating forces of your mind, and discourage and eliminate negative emotions. A mind dominated by positive emotion becomes a favorable abode for the state of mind known as faith. A mind so dominated may at will give the subconscious mind instructions, which it will accept and act upon immediately. Faith is the state of mind which may be induced by autosuggestion. All through the ages, religious leaders have admonished struggling humanity to have faith in this, that, and the other dogma or creed. But they have failed to tell people how to have faith. They have not stated that faith is a state of mind and that it may be induced by self-suggestion. In language any normal human being can understand, we all describe all that is known about the principle through which faith may be developed where it does not already exist. Have faith in yourself, faith in the infinite. Before we begin, we should be reminded that faith is the external accelerator which gives life, power, and action to the impulse of thought. The foregoing sentence is worth reading a second time, and a third, and a fourth. It is worth reading aloud. Faith is the starting point of all accumulation of riches. Faith is the starting point of all accumulation of riches. Faith is the basis of all miracles and mysteries that cannot be analyzed by the rules of science. Faith is the only known antidote to failure. Faith is the element, the chemical, which, when mixed with prayer, give one direct communication with infinite intelligence. Faith is the element that transforms the ordinary vibration of thought created by the finite mind of man into the spiritual equivalent. Faith is the only agency through which the cosmic force of infinite intelligence can be harnessed and used. Every one of the foregoing statements is capable of proof. The proof is simple and easily demonstrated. It is wrapped up in the principle of autosuggestion. Let us center our attention, therefore, upon the subject of self-suggestion and find out what it is capable of achieving. It is a well-known fact that when one comes finally to believe whatever one repeats to oneself, whether the statement be true or false. If a person repeats a lie over and over, a lie will eventually be accepted as truth. Moreover, it will be believed to be the truth. Each of us is what we are because of the dominating thoughts we permit to occupy our minds. Thoughts which are deliberately placed in our own mind and encouraged with sympathy, and with which are mixed in any one or more of the emotions, constitute the motivating forces. These forces direct and control our every movement, act, and deed. Thoughts which are mixed with any of the feelings or emotions constitute a magnetic force which attracts from the vibrations of the ether other similar or related thoughts. A thought thus magnetized with emotion may be compared to that when planted in fertile soil, germinates, grows, and multiplies itself over and over again until that one small seed becomes countless millions of seeds of the same brand. A thought thus magnetized with emotion may be compared to a seed that, when planted in fertile soil, germinates, grows, and multiplies itself over and over again until that one small seed becomes countless millions of seeds of the same brand. The ether is a great cosmic mass of eternal forces of vibration. It is made up of both destructive vibrations and constructive vibrations. It carries at all times vibrations of fear, poverty, disease, failure, misery, and vibrations of prosperity, health, success, and happiness. It does this as surely as it carries the sounds of hundreds of orchestrations of musics and hundreds of human voices, all of which maintain their individuality and means of identification through the medium of radio. From the great storehouse of the ether, the human mind is constantly attracting vibrations that harmonize with that which dominates the mind. Any thought, idea, plan, or purpose which one holds in one's mind attracts from the vibrations of the ether a host of its relatives. It adds these relatives to its own force and grows until it becomes the dominating, motivating master of the individual whose mind it has been housed. Now let's go back to the starting point and find out how the original seed of an idea, plan, or purpose may be planted in the mind. The information is easily conveyed. Any idea, plan, or purpose may be placed in the mind through repetition of thought. This is why you're asked to write out a statement of your major purpose or definite chief aim. Commit to it, memory, and in audible words day after day until these vibrations of sound have reached your subconscious mind. This is why you are asked to write out a statement of your major purpose or definite chief aim. Commit it to memory and repeat it in audible words day after day until these vibrations of sound have reached your subconscious mind. We are what we are because of the vibrations of thought that we pick up and register through the stimuli of our daily environment. Resolve to throw off the influence of any unfortunate environment and to build your own life to order. Taking an inventory of mental assets and liabilities, you will discover that your greatest weakness is lack of self-confidence. This handicap can be surmounted and timidity translated into courage through the aid of the principle of autosuggestion. The application of this principle may be made through a simple arrangement of positive thought impulses stated in writing, memorized and repeated until they become a part of the working equipment of the subconscious faculty of your mind. The self-confidence formula. Number 1, I know that I have the ability to achieve the object of my definite purpose in life. Therefore, I demand of myself persistent, continuous action toward its attainment, and I here and now promise to take such action. Number 2, I realize the dominating thoughts of my mind will eventually reproduce themselves in outward physical action and gradually transform themselves into physical reality. Therefore, I will concentrate my thoughts for 30 minutes daily upon the task of thinking of the person I intend to become, thereby creating in my mind a clear mental picture of that person. Number 3, I know through the principle of autosuggestion that any desire I persistently hold in my mind will eventually seek expression through some practical means of attaining the object. Therefore, I will devote 10 minutes daily to demanding of myself the development of self-confidence. Number 4, I have already clearly written down a description of my definite chief aim in life. I will never stop trying until I have developed sufficient self-confidence for its attainment. Number 5, I fully realize that no wealth or position can long endure unless built upon truth and justice. Therefore, I will engage in no transaction that does not benefit all whom it affects. I will succeed by attracting to myself the forces I wish to use and the cooperation of other people. I will induce others to serve me because of my willingness to serve others. I will eliminate hatred, envy, jealousy, selfishness, and cynicism by developing love for all humanity, because I know that a negative attitude toward others can never bring me success. I will cause others to believe in me because I will believe in them and in myself. I will sign my name to this formula, commit it to memory, and repeat it aloud once a day with full faith that it will gradually influence my thoughts and actions so that I will become a self-reliant and successful person. Underpinning this formula is a law of nature that no one has yet been able to explain. It has baffled the scientists of all ages. Psychologists have named this law autosuggestion and let it go at that. The name by which one calls this law is of little importance. The important fact about it is that it works for the glory and success of humankind if it is used constructively. If used destructively, on the other hand, it will destroy just as readily. And this statement may be found a significant truth. Those who go down in defeat and end their lives in poverty, misery, and distress do so because of the negative application of the principle of autosuggestion. This may be found in the fact that all impulses of thought have a tendency to clothe themselves in their physical equivalent. The subconscious mind, the chemical laboratory in which all thought impulses are combined and made ready for translation into physical reality, makes no distinction between constructive and destructive thought impulses. It works with the material we feed it through our thought impulses. The subconscious mind will translate into reality a thought driven by fear just as readily as it will translate into reality a thought driven by courage or faith. The pages of medical history are rich with illustrious illustrations of cases of suggestive suicide. A person may commit suicide through negative suggestion just as effectively as by any other means. The pages of medical history are rich with illustrations of cases of suggestive suicide. A person may commit suicide through negative suggestion just as effectively by any other means. In a Midwestern city, a bank official named Joseph Grant borrowed a large sum of bank's money without the consent of the directors. He lost the money through gambling. One afternoon, the bank examiner came and began to check the accounts. Grant left the bank and took a room in a local hotel. When they found him 3 days later, he was lying in the bed, wailing and moaning, repeating over and over these words: "My God, this will kill me. I cannot stand the disgrace." In a short time, he was dead. The doctors pronounced the case as one of mental suicide. Just as electricity will turn the wheels of industry and provide useful service if used constructively, or sniff out life if wrongly used, so will the law of autosuggestion lead you to peace and prosperity or down into the valley of misery, failure, and death. It all depends on your degree of understanding and the application of it. If you fill your mind with fear, doubt, and disbelief in your ability to connect with and use the forces of infinite intelligence, the law of autosuggestion will take the spirit of unbelief and use it as a pattern which your subconscious mind will translate into its physical equivalent. This statement is as true as the statement that 2 and 2 are 4. Like the wind that carries one ship east and another west, the law of autosuggestion will lift you up and pull you down, according to the way that you set your sails of thought. The law of autosuggestion, through which any person may rise to altitudes of achievement that stagger the imagination, is well described in the following verse. If you think you were beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win, but you think you can't, it's almost certain you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For out of the world we find. Success begins with a person's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you are outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but soon or late, the one who wins is the one who thinks he can. Observe the words which have been emphasized, and you will catch the deep meaning the poet had in mind. Somewhere in your makeup, perhaps in the cells of your brain, lies sleeping the seed of achievement. If aroused and put into action, this would carry you to heights such as you may never have hoped to attain. Just as a master musician may cause the beautiful strains of music to pour forth the strings of a violin, you may arouse the genius which lies asleep in your brain and cause it to drive you upward to whatever goal you may wish to achieve. Abraham Lincoln was a failure at everything he tried until he was well past the age of 40. He was Mr. Nobody from nowhere until a great experience came into his life, aroused the sleeping genius within his heart and brain, and gave the world one of its really great men. That experience was mixed with the emotions of sorrow and love. It came to him through Anne Rutledge, the only woman he truly ever loved. It is known that the emotion of love is closely akin to the state of mind known as faith. It is a known fact that the emotion of love is closely akin to the state of mind known as faith. Love comes very near to one's translating one's thoughts, impulses into the spiritual equivalent. Love comes very near to translating one's thought impulses into their spiritual equivalent. During this research, the author discovered from the analysis of the work and achievements of hundreds of men of outstanding accomplishment that there was the influence of a woman's love behind nearly every one of them. The emotion of love in the human heart and brain creates a favorable field of magnetic attraction. This causes an influx of the higher and finer vibrations that are afloat in the ether. Let us consider the power of faith as it was demonstrated by a man well known to all of civilization, Mahatma Gandhi of India. In this man, the world experienced one of the most astounding examples of the possibilities of faith. Gandhi wielded more potential power than any man living in his time. And this despite the fact that he had none of the unorthodox tools of power, such as money, battleships, soldiers, and materials of warfare. Gandhi had no money, he had no home, he didn't even own a suit of clothes. But he did have power. How did he come by that power? He created it out of his understanding of the principle of faith and through his ability to transplant that faith into the minds of 200 million people. Gandhi accomplished, through the influence of faith, something that the strongest military power on earth could not, and never will, achieve through soldiers and military equipment. He accomplished the astounding feat of influencing 200 million minds to merge and move in unison as a single mind. What other force on earth except faith could do as much? In the mid-20th century, Martin Luther King, through his deep faith and his belief in human rights and dignity for all people, led men and women of all races, religions, and beliefs to join in his struggle of civil rights. His dream that people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character, has not been fully realized. But his work and his death have led to significant improvements in civil rights and an impetus to keep fighting for their achievement. The watchword of the future will be human happiness and contentment. When this state of mind has been attained, the production will take care of itself more effectively than anything else ever accomplished, where people did not and could not mix faith and individual interest with their labor. Because of the need for faith and cooperation in business and industry, it will be both interesting and profitable to analyze a particular event. This provides an excellent understanding of the method by which industrialists and leaders of business accumulate great fortunes by giving before they try to get. The event chosen for this illustration dates back to 1900, when the United States Steel Corporation was being formed. As you read the story, keep in mind these fundamental facts, and you will understand how ideas have been converted into huge fortunes.
Please allow us to pay a few bills and take a station break as we patronize our wonderful sponsors. We'll be right back with the Relevance Podcast.
First, the United States Steel Corporation was born in the minds of Charles M. Schwab in the form of an idea he created through his imagination. Second, he mixed faith with his idea. Third, he formulated a plan for the transformation of his idea into physical and financial reality. Fourth, he put his plan into action with his famous speech at the University Club. Fifth, he applied and followed through on his plan with persistence and backed it with firm decision until it had been fully carried out. Sixth, he prepared the way for success by a burning desire for success. If you have often wondered how great fortunes are accumulated, this story of the creation of the United States Steel Corporation will be enlightening. If you have any doubt that people can think and grow rich, this story should dispel that doubt, because in it, you can plainly see the application of a major portion of the 13 principles described in this book. John Lowell, in the New York World Telegram, with whose courtesy it is here reprinted, dramatically told this astounding story of the power of an idea. A pretty after-dinner speech for $1 billion. When, on the evening of December 12, 1900, some 80 of the nation's financial nobility gathered in the banquet hall of the University Club on Fifth Avenue to do honor to a young man from out of the West. Not half a dozen of the guests realized they were to witness the most significant episode in American industrial history. J. Edward Simmons and Charles Stewart Smith, their hearts full of gratitude for the lavish hospitality bestowed on them by Charles M. Schwab during a recent visit to Pittsburgh, had arranged the dinner to introduce the 38-year-old steel man to the Eastern Banking Society. They warned him, in fact, that the bosoms within New York's stuffed shirts would not be responsive to oratory, and that if he didn't want to bore the Stillmans and the Harrimans and the Vanderbilts, he had better limit himself to 15 or 20 minutes of polite vaporings and let it go at that. Even John Pierpont Morgan, sitting on the right hand of Schwab, as became his imperial dignity, intended to grace the banquet table with his presence only briefly. And so far as the press and public were concerned, the whole affair was of so little moment that no mention of it found its way into print the next day. So the two hosts and their distinguished guests ate their way through the usual 7 or 8 courses. There was little conversation, and what was there was restrained. Few of the bankers and brokers had met Schwab, whose career had flowered along the banks of the Monongahela, and none knew him well. But before the evening was over, they, and with them Money Master Morgan, were to be swept off their feet, and $1 billion baby, the United States Steel Corporation, was to be conceived. It is perhaps unfortunate, for the sake of history, that no record of Charles Schwab's speech at the dinner was ever made. He repeated some of the parts of it later during a similar meeting of Chicago bankers, and still later when the government brought suit to dissolve the Steel Trust. He gave his own version from the witness stand of the remarks that stimulated Morgan into a frenzy of financial activity. It is probable, however, that it was a homely speech, somewhat ungrammatical, for the niceties of language never bothered Schwab, full of epigrams. But aside from that, it had a galvanic force and effect upon the 5 billions of estimated capital that was represented by the diners. After it was over and the gathering was still under its spell, although Schwab had talked for 90 minutes, Morgan led the orator to a recessed window where, dangling their legs from the high, uncomfortable seat, they talked for an hour more. The magic of the Schwab personality had been turned on, full force. But what was more important and lasting was the full-fledged, clear-cut program he laid down for the aggrandizement of steel. Many other men had tried to interest Morgan in slapping together a steel trust after the pattern of a biscuit, wire and hoop, sugar, rubber, whiskey, oil, or chewing gum combinations. John W. Gates, the gambler, had urged it, but Morgan distrusted him. The Moore boys, Bill and Jim, Chicago stock jobbers who had glued together a match trust and a cracker corporation, had urged it and failed. Elbert H. Gary, the sanctimonious country lawyer, wanted to foster it, but he wasn't big enough to be impressive. Until Schwab's eloquence took J.P. Morgan to the heights from which he could visualize the solid results of the most daring financial undertaking ever conceived, the project was regarded as a delirious dream of easy money crackpots. The financial magnetism that began a generation ago to attract thousands of small and sometimes inefficiently managed companies into large and competition-crushing combinations had become operative in the steel world through the devices of that jovial business pirate, John W. Gates. Gates had already formed the American Steel and Wire Company out of a chain of smaller concerns, and together with Morgan had created the Federal Steel Company. The National Tube and American Bridge companies were two more of Morgan's concerns, and the Moore brothers had forsaken the match and cookie business to form the American Group, Tin Plate, Steel Hoop, Sheet Steel, and the National Steel Company. But by the side of Andrew Carnegie's gigantic vertical trust, a trust owned and operated by 53 partners, those other combinations were minuscule. They might combine to their heart's content, but the whole lot of them couldn't make a dent in the Carnegie organization, and Morgan knew it. The eccentric old Scot knew it too. From the magnificent heights of Skibo Castle, he had viewed, first with amusement and then with resentment, the attempts of Morgan's smaller companies to cut into his business. When the attempts became too bold, Carnegie's temper was translated into anger and retaliation. He decided to duplicate every mill owned by his rivals. Hitherto, he hadn't been interested in wire, pipe, hoops, or sheet. Instead, he was content to sell companies the raw steel and let them work it into whatever shape they wanted. Now, with Schwab as his chief and able lieutenant, he planned to drive his enemies to the wall. So it was that, in the speech of Charles M. Schwab, Morgan saw the answer to his problem of combination. A trust without Carnegie, giant of them all, would be no trust at all. A plum pudding, as one writer said, without the plums. Schwab's speech on the night of December 12, 1900, undoubtedly carried the inference, though not the pledge, that the vast Carnegie enterprise could be brought under the Morgan tent. He talked of the world future of steel, of reorganization for efficiency, of specialization, of the scrapping of unsuccessful mills and concentration of effort on the flourishing properties, of economies in the one ore traffic, of economies in overhead and administrative departments, of capturing foreign markets. More than that, he told the buccaneers among them wherein lay the errors of the customary piracy. More than that, he told the buccaneers among them wherein lay the errors of their customary piracy. Their purposes, he inferred, had been to create monopolies, raise prices, and pay themselves fat dividends out of privilege. Schwab condemned the system in his heartiest manner. The short-sightedness of such a policy, he told his hearers, lay in the fact that it restricted the market in an era when everything cried for expansion. By cheapening the cost of steel, he argued, an ever-expanding market would be created. More uses of steel would be devised, and a goodly portion of the world trade could be captured. Actually, he did not know it, Schwab was an apostle of the modern mass production. So the dinner at the University Club came to an end. Morgan went home to think about Schwab's rosy predictions. Schwab went back to Pittsburgh to run the steel business for Andrew Carnegie, while Gary and the rest went back to their stock ticklers to fiddle around in anticipation of the next move. It was not long coming. It took Morgan about 1 week to digest the feast of reason Schwab had placed before him. When he had assured himself that no financial indigestion was to result, he sent for Schwab and found that young man rather coy. Mr. Carnegie, Schwab indicated, might not like it if he found out his trusted company president had been flirting with the Emperor of Wall Street, the street upon which Carnegie was resolved never to tread. Then it was suggested by John W. Gates, the go-between, that if Schwab happened to be in the Bellevue Hotel in Philadelphia, J.P. Morgan might also happen to be there. When Schwab arrived, however, Morgan was inconveniently ill at his New York home, and so, on the elder man's passing invitation, Schwab went to the New York and presented himself at the door of the fiancier's library. When Schwab arrived, however, Morgan was inconveniently ill at his New York home, and so, on the elder man's pressing invitation, Schwab went to New York and presented himself at the door of the fiancier's library. Now, certain economic historians have professed the belief that from the beginning to the end of drama, the stage was set by Andrew Carnegie, that the dinner, the famous speech, the Sunday night conference between Schwab and the Money King were events arranged by the canny Scott. The truth is exactly the opposite. When Schwab was called in to consummate the deal, he didn't even know whether the little boss, as Andrew was called, would so much as listen to an offer to sell, particularly to a group of men who Andrew regarded as being endowed with something less than holiness. But Schwab did take into conference with him, in his own handwriting, 6 sheets of copperplate figures representing to his mind the physical worth and the potential earning capacity of every steel company he regarded as an essential star in the new metal firmament. 4 men pondered over these figures all night. The chief, of course, was Morgan, steadfast in his belief in the divine right of money. With him was the aristocratic partner, Robert Bacon, a scholar and a gentleman. The third was John W. Gates, whom Morgan scorned as a gambler and used as a tool. The fourth was Schwab, who knew more about the processes of making and stealing making and selling steel than any other whole group of men then living. Throughout that conference, the Pittsburghers' figures were never questioned. Throughout that conference, the Pittsburghers' figures were never questioned. If he said a company was worth so much, then it was worth that much and no more. He was insistent, too, upon including any in the combination only those concerns he nominated. He had conceived a corporation in which there would be no duplication, not even to satisfy the greed of friends who wanted to unload their companies upon the broad Morgan shoulders. Thus he left out by design a number of the larger concerns upon which the walruses and carpenters of Wall Street had cast hungry eyes. When dawn came, Morgan rose and straightened his back. Only one question remained. Do you think he can persuade Andrew Carnegie to sell? He asked. I can try, said Schwab. If you can get him to sell, I will undertake the matter, said Morgan. So far, so good. But would Carnegie sell? How much would he demand? Schwab thought about $320 billion. What would he take payment in? Common or preferred stocks, bonds, cash? Nobody could raise $1/3 billion in cash. There was a golf game in January on the frost-cracking heath of the St. Andrews Links in Winchester, when Andrew bundled up in his sweaters against the cold and Charlie talking all the time as usual to keep his spirits up. But no word of business was mentioned until the pair sat down in the cozy warmth of the Carnegie cottage hard by. But no word of business was mentioned until the pair sat down in the cozy warmth of the Carnegie cottage hard by. Then, with the same persuasiveness that had hypnotized 80 millionaires at the University Club, Schwab poured out the glittering promises of retirement and comfort of untold millions to satisfy the old man's social hindrances. Then, with the same persuasiveness that had hypnotized 80 millionaires at the University Club, Schwab poured out the glittering promises of retirement and comfort of untold millions to satisfy the old man's social caprices. Carnegie capitulated. Carnegie capitulated. Carnegie capitulated, wrote a figure on a slip of paper, handed it to Schwab, and said, "All right, that's what we'll sell for." The figure was approximately $400 billion and was reached by taking the $320 billion mentioned by Schwab as a basic figure and adding it to the $80 billion to represent the increased capital value over the previous 2 years. Later on the deck of the transatlantic liner, the Scotsman said ruefully to Morgan, "I wish I had asked for $100 billion more." "If you had asked for it, you'd have gotten it," Morgan told him cheerfully. The 38-year-old Schwab had his reward. He was made president of the new corporation and remained in control until 1930. This dramatic story of big business was included in this book because it's a perfect illustration of the method by which desire can be transmuted into its physical equivalent. I imagine some readers will question the statement that a mere intangible desire can be converted into a physical equivalent. Doubtless, some will say, you cannot convert nothing into something. The answer is in the story of the United States Steel. The giant organization was created in the mind of one man. The plan by which the organization was provided with the steel mills that gave it financial stability was created in the mind of the same man. His faith, his desire, his imagination, his persistence were the real ingredients that went into United States Steel. The steel mills and mechanical equipment acquired by the corporation after it had been bought into legal existence were incidental, but careful analysis will disclose the fact that the appraised value of the properties acquired by the corporation increased in value by an estimated $600 million by the mere transaction that consolidated them under one management. In other words, Charles M. Schwab's idea, plus the faith which he conveyed it to the minds of J.P. Morgan and the others, was marketed for the profit of approximately $600 billion. Not an insignificant sum for a single idea. What happened to some of the people who took their share of the millions of dollars of profit made by this transaction is a matter with which we are not now concerned. The important feature of this astounding achievement is that it serves as unquestionable. The important feature of this astounding achievement is that it served as an unquestionable evidence of the soundness of the philosophy described in this book. Moreover, the practicality of the philosophy has been established by the fact that the United States Steel Company prospered. It became one of the richest and most powerful corporations in America, employing thousands of people, developing new usage for steel, and opening new markets, thus proving that $600 billion in profit, which the Schwab idea produced, was earned. Riches begin in the form of thought. The amount is limited only by the person in whose mind the thought is put into motion. Faith removes limitation. Remember this when you are ready to bargain with life or whatever it is you ask as your price for having passed this way. Remember also that the man who created the United States Steel Corporation was practically unknown at the time. He was merely Andrew Carnegie's Man Friday until he gave birth to this famous idea. After that, he quickly rose to a position of power, fame, and riches. Now, for another example of how faith in an idea made millions for one man and through it helped countless others increase their wealth. Sir John Templeton is a man with great faith in his talent to make sound and profitable investments. Templeton was better than most people at investing money because people often made investments based on emotion and ignorance and not common sense. He felt by using his skill in investing, he could not only provide a needed service to the small investor, but make a good deal of money for himself as well. To accomplish this, he started a group of mutual funds to manage other people's money. This was a pioneering project of mutual funds were a relatively new concept at the time. This was a pioneering project as mutual funds were a relatively new concept at the time. Templeton honed that concept into what it is today. He reminisced that at the Templeton Growth Fund's first annual meeting, the participants consisted of John Templeton, one part-time employee, and one shareholder. We held the meeting in the dining room of the retired General Foods executive to save money. The Templeton funds now have more than 6,000 employees worldwide and $36 billion in assets. Driving that growth is the Templeton's Group's well-earned reputation as the premier fund group for investing. A $10,000 investment in the Templeton Growth Fund 40 years ago is worth $3 million today. By the time he retired and sold his Templeton Group Fund interests in 1992, estimated at $400 million, John Templeton estimated that he had helped 1 million people make money in addition to his own success. There are no limitations to the mind except those we acknowledge. Both poverty and riches are the offspring of thought.
As always, thanks for listening in on the show. And be sure to check out Mike's book, A Simple Guide to Child Support Redemption, available on Amazon.com, or his mobile app, Child Support Made Simple, CSMSX, available through the Google Play Store. And for the latest in current events and videos that really matter, be sure to log on to Mike's YouTube page, author Mike R. Aikins, or his website at www.relevancepodcast.com.